Good afternoon, colleagues. I come from a number of different places at the moment, and I feel as though I'm split into many different parts. I live in Köln, where my brain is, but my heart is in South Africa, and sometimes my body is somewhere else. As it was yesterday, I was in Berlin. And a few weeks ago, I was at a very fascinating meeting in Johannesburg with the Humboldt Forum that had an engagement with colleagues from the museum sector on the African continent. And I want to talk to you about the notions of museum that I have come to understand over the last few years, arising out of my scholarship and arising out of my practice in the field of museums in a number of settings. Firstly, in the practice of making a new museum in a new democratic South Africa, where South Africa has been a kind of a laboratory of how you rethink museum as part of the process of making a new society, where the part of South Africa where I come from is marked by multiple colonialisms, not just one, but multiple, where we were colonized by the Dutch, where the Dutch don't even recognize that as a colonialism in their national history because it was a colonialism of a mercantile company. And we were colonized by the British, but where South Africa was also a colonizer. And so we have these multiple colonial legacies in our museum system, where, like in other societies in the so-called West, a fundamental classificatory division occurred between museums for those people deemed to be civilized and museums for those people deemed to be without history. We have the fundamental classificatory division between museums of cultural history and museums of anthropology. Now, I know that there's a language difference between English and German, what we mean by anthropology and what we mean by ethnography, but I'll take it that you understand some of those distinguishing features. And the long and the short of it is that we are living at a time when new notions of museum are emerging. There's no blueprint, there's no one answer fit all situation. There are multiple directions that are emerging in different parts of the world. And we need to look at this as an ongoing, productive set of challenges and debates. And one of the possibilities might be that the outcome of all of this might be that we could arrive at something after the museum. And one of the arguments that I want to put to you is that first and foremost, museum is not an administration, and museum is not a collection. Yes, of course, museums are collecting institutions, and that is what they've been in the main. But in many parts of the world, in Southern Africa, in Latin America, museums have been emerging in which their museumness has not been driven by artifacts or collections. Indeed, where they might not have collections at all, but where they insist that they are museums. And there have been, at a certain international policy level, there have been meetings taking place that has led to a new UNESCO definition of what a museum is. And there are a set of meetings that are going to be taking place, especially because these museums without collections are calling on their states to resource their museum projects. And I want to put it to you that in the main, a museum is an epistemology. Museum is the way in which we understand the world and how that is organized and arranged and classified. And it's been interesting to realize how peculiarly those arrangements have occurred in Germany, where among some of our colleagues, there is even a denial of what colonialism might mean. There might even be a denial that this is an infrastructure of museums that is fundamentally marked by colonialism. And so in South Africa, we've had one very interesting epistemic development where, as you can imagine, it is not possible to make a new nation on the basis of the Ethnographic Museum. The Ethnographic Museum, which is the creation of colonialism, does not deliver a post-colonial society. And so the ethnographic collections have been reconfigured into the same collections division as the cultural history collections. And there the epistemic work is occurring, not just for South Africa, but perhaps for everyone, on what it means to have a post-ethnographic museum. Without claiming any easy victories, the possibility has to be inaugurated of thinking about what a museum can be outside of those categories. And some of the thinking that assists that process comes from the experience of making museums without collections. Of course, the major museum example of that kind is the District 6 Museum in Cape Town, where a museum was created almost by accident, because it is a museum based on a narrative. It is the story about apartheid forced removals and the attempt on the part of people to reclaim their land, but also to reclaim their humanity. And so a community museum was created on the basis of stories. And what is quite interesting about that case is that it has been going through quite an intense process of museumization, in which it has ironically become a place where objects do get managed, and which does have collections, and which has to go through the formal museological processes of managing a collection. And so I want to put it to you that yes, we manage collections, yes, we do exhibitions, yes, we do museum education, but those are not our challenges. The museum is not only an epistemology, but the museum also needs to be productively thought of as a meeting place of different forms of authority, a meeting place of different knowledges, in which museum curators and museum directors and those who govern the museums have to be open to the possibility of re-engaging the question of authority, because we cannot rely on the old forms of authority that have driven our collections. And that means that we have to find new relationships with the societies from which these collections come. Now, unfortunately, the debate about repatriation, universal museum, and so forth has been very polarized and seemingly locked in the kind of politics of nationalism. Instead of us grasping the opportunity to seek new relationships with each other, to find those ways in which the museum becomes those negotiations. The museum is precisely the place at which these negotiations occur. So that once again, the museum is not just the collection. The museum is not the bureaucratics of the administration. The museum is not just the institution. The museum lies in the very dynamic possibilities that are opened up by re-engaging the authority with which we work. Thank you.